Tonight we have come to 2 Samuel chapter 16. So you may want to get your Bible and follow along. And just to update on what has taken place, Absalom had declared himself king and had rebelled against his father David. David decided the best thing for him to do was to leave Jerusalem. Now, you might have thought he'd have just taken Jerusalem as his fort to fight him off, but he did not want to be cooped up in Jerusalem while Absalom was out trying to run the rest of the country. David left Jerusalem so that Absalom would come there, and that's what Absalom was going to do. And then we read how David left Jerusalem and walked down to the brook Kidron, and then going up toward the Mount of Olives. And he's going to go over that mountain now as we come to chapter 16. And he is going barefoot with his head covered. And they're weeping as they leave Jerusalem. Now we're going to meet with 4 people just on the other side of the Mount of Olives. Ziba, it is Ziba, Shimei, Hushai, and Ahithophel. And so I put Hushai and Ahithophel together there. They're going to be the counselors. You'll see that. But let's look at Ziba, whom we have met before. And now this new person in David's life, Shimei. Are we ready? Here we go. Well, here's the memory verse. The memory verse. 2 Samuel 16 and verse 8. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. So let's see what happens now. 2 Samuel 16, 1 through 4, we'll talk about Ziba. Now, you might remember Ziba. When David sought to find out was there any left of the house of Saul that he could show kindness to, Ziba said, yes, there is. There is Mephibosheth, a son of Jonathan. He was hiding out. I can't remember the place of the village, but it's a little unknown village. David said, bring Mephibosheth to me. Well, Mephibosheth comes to David and he is frightened. And he falls on his face before David and declares himself David's servant. But Mephibosheth is lame in both feet. And David says, Mephibosheth, to rise up. From now on, you'll get to eat at my table as one of my sons. And he restored to Mephibosheth all of the land that had belonged to Saul, and had Ziba and his sons and his servants to care for that land for Mephibosheth. Well, here comes Ziba again into the story. When David was a little past the top of the hill, that would be the Mount of Olives, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of asses saddled, and upon him 200 loaves of bread, and 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 of summer fruits, and a bottle of wine. Ziba has come to provide David what he will need as he makes his escape from Jerusalem and gets to the other side of the Jordan River. The king said unto Ziba, what meanest thou by these? And Ziba said, the asses be for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine that such as be as faint in the wilderness to drink. And the king said, where is thy master's son? That would be Mephibosheth. And Ziba said unto the king, behold, he abideth at Jerusalem. For he said, today shall the house of Israel restore to me the kingdom of my father. Ziba said, Mephibosheth is going to stay in Jerusalem. He thinks he can get the kingdom back, the kingdom of Saul. back. Now remember, Ziba said that. We're going to see in the chapters to come that that's not what happened. And Mephibosheth is going to present himself to David, and Mephibosheth is going to have proof of what really took place. And so we'll see that in the chapters to come. Well, the king said unto Ziba, Behold, thine are all that pertaineth unto Mephibosheth. And Ziba said, I humbly beseech thee that I may find grace in thy sight, O Lord my king. Looks like Ziba is trying to get on the king's side, and now all that had been Saul's and then had been Mephibosheth's, David has given it all to Ziba. And that may have been what Ziba had in mind during all of this. Well, let's go to the next person. And it's sometimes we try to picture in our minds, what do these Bible characters look like? And little known to almost anyone is there was actually a photograph of Shemaiah. There's a photograph they found. It was in an envelope. In a vanilla envelope. They opened it up and pulled it out, and there he was. Shimei. Now, I asked the kids today if they knew about Ernest T. Bass, and they hadn't seen that. So the assignment for the adults is you've got to get your kids to watch Andy Griffith. And if they will watch an episode of Ernest T. Bass, then they're going to have an idea of who Shimei was, or the kind of character he was. Look at him. He's sitting there holding that rock in his hand. Remember him? Well, we all kind of know about Shimei here, who later starred in an Andy Griffith show under the name of Ernest T. Bass. Now, here we go. And this character just seems like him to me. Here's what we have. And when David the king was come to Bahurim, now that was a little village just on the other side of the Mount of Olives. So he's gotten over the top, on his way down, and a little village just on the other side. Behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name is Shimei, the son of Gera. He came forth, and he cursed as he came. Now that doesn't mean he was saying bad words. But he wants evil to fall upon David is what he's wanting him to do. And he cast stones at David and at all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. I mean, David had his men with him. It didn't bother this fella. He's out there throwing stones at them and just cursing at them and causing a fuss over them. See how that looks like that character? I can just see him doing this. Now, it says, when Shimei, when he cursed, come out, thou bloody man, thou art a man of Belial. Every now and then in the Bible, we read this word, Belial. In the King James Version, it's put as a name, as though it's a person named Belial. What it means is you are a worthless fellow. We read about in the New Testament, you remember about those lewd fellows of the baser sort that was raised up against Paul? They'd be sons of Belial. That's what we're talking about. So David, you're just a worthless fellow. He's saying ugly things about David. And he said, here's the memory verse. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. Well, now Shimei didn't have his story straight. If you'll remember David, he did not take the kingdom away from Saul. He acknowledged Saul as the Lord's anointed, and he would not lift up his hand against Saul even when he had opportunity to do so. But he had let the Lord give that kingdom unto David. But David was a bloody man. He had killed many men in battle, and then he had had Uriah put to death. And this must have pricked David's conscience as he went along. Now we've got Abishai, a son of Zeruiah. Remember those sons of Zeruiah? Zeruiah is David's sister. And Joab is one of those sons of Zeruiah. Here's his little brother Abishai, and he's about as bad as Joab. And he knows how to fix this. He says unto the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Well, he called David a son of Belial. So Abishai, he's calling him a dead dog. They're just calling each other these names, aren't they? You ever seen kids do that? They're acting like kids. Just call one a name, call the other name. And of course, a dead dog is useless too. So it's much like this son of Belial that we're talking about. You dead dog. He's causing him to curse my lord the king. Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. Well, that'll solve that, won't it? Just take his head off. It reminds me so much of the queen on Through the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland. She was always saying, off with their heads. Remember that? That's how she solved all her problems. Just off with their heads. Well, that's what Abishai did. Let me go up there and take his head off. Well, the king said, what have I to do with thee, ye sons of Zeruiah? I mean, they had such a different approach to solving problems that David did. All they knew to do, boy, let's just go out there and kill them. I mean, that was Joab and Abishai. They just go out and go after their enemies and put an end to this. But David was always much more gracious to his enemies. And he says here, let him curse. Because the Lord hath said to him, curse David, who then shall say, wherefore hast thou done so? Or as David said, maybe the Lord sent him out here to curse me. David is feeling the woes of his sins and blaming himself for what has gone on. The Lord sent him out here to curse me. Why should we say he shouldn't do it? Let him curse. Let him curse. David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son which came forth of my bowels seeketh my life. How much more now may this Benjamite do it? Let him alone, and let him curse. For the Lord hath bidden him. The Lord's going to let him curse. I'm going to let him curse. And then he says in verse 12, and this shows just how low David has come in his spirit. He says, it may be that the Lord will look on mine affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. So, David and his men went by the way. Shimei went along the hillside over against him and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him and cast dust. Now, if that doesn't fit that character that we see on that Andy Griffith show, I don't know who does. It just seems like an Ernest T. Bass type character to me. But that's how upset Shimei is at this. Well, the king and all the people that were with him came weary and refreshed themselves there. Well, the question is, where is there? Between the Testaments, the Greeks had conquered all the world, and everyone was fascinated at Greek culture. And there in Alexandria, Egypt, it was a great center of learning. And there was a great library there, and they are trying to collect all the books of all the world and store them in the great library at Alexandria. And there was a Jewish settlement in Alexandria, and they said the Greeks need a copy of our law in Alexandria. And so they translated the Hebrew Bible from the Hebrew into the Greek. There were about 70 scholars that did this. And so they call that the Septuagint translation. Now we have old copies of the Hebrew, but we have the Septuagint translation, and a lot of it is based on copies of the Hebrew that are older than the copies of the Hebrew that are available to us. What the Jews would do, they would copy the Old Testament onto a new scroll, and then when they had the new copy, they would destroy their old copy. And so we don't have a lot of old copies of the Old Hebrew. And the Septuagint's translated out of older copies that were available to us. Sometimes people wonder the differences in the Septuagint and the Hebrew. Maybe the Septuagint has some things in it that are more correct than we've been able to get out of the Hebrew because of the way they did these copies. And it's interesting, in the Septuagint translation that's in the Greek, it identifies the there. It says they came weary and refreshed themselves at the Jordan River. That seems to be the barrier David was crossing over. So I just held that to kind of give you an insight. It's kind of interesting to take that old Septuagint translation and compare that. What we have is translated out of the Hebrew. It's interesting to compare what's in the Septuagint. And then later they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they found copies of the Hebrew Bible older than the Septuagint. And it matches up pretty good with our Hebrew that we have. So all that's kind of interesting. But it probably was the Jordan River David was headed for as a barrier between him and his sons. Now let's go to Hushai and Ahithophel. Now these are the wise men that kings would have at their hand to ask counsel of. And Ahithophel had gone over to Absalom. And Absalom and all the people of the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. And it came to pass, when Hushai, the Archite, David's friend, was come to Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom, God save the king, God save the king. Now you better watch this, Hushai. Hushai has a way of saying something where you think you know what he means, but he means something else. When he's saying, God save the king, God save the king, Absalom, you know, we've said that song, You're So Vain, you probably think that song was about you. Absalom thought he was talking about him. Well, I must be the king, you know. He's saying, God save me. And he thought, look at there, God save the king, God save the king. He's talking about me. I suspect Hushai may have in his mind been thinking about David. But Absalom didn't know better. Absalom says this. He says to Hushai, Is not thy kindness to thy friend? Why wentest thou not with thy friend? Now, David's your friend. Why didn't you go with David? Well, look at Hushai's answer. It's ambiguous. Absalom wrote in himself into this. Hushai may have meant something else. Hushai said unto Absalom, Nay, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his will I be, and with him will I abide. Absalom thought, boy, that's me. But the Lord didn't choose Absalom, did he? See how Hushai had a way of saying something and made Absalom think, this is me. And Hushai may have meant something else here. Look how Hushai goes on. Look what he says. And again, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? He did not say, I should serve in the presence of his son. He just kind of left it as a question there. Absalom thought he knew the answer. And then Hushai said this, As I have served in thy father's presence, so will I be in thy presence. He didn't say, I'll serve you, Absalom. He says, I'll serve in your presence. I'll serve you the way I served in the presence of your father. Now, the way he served in the presence of David was for David's good. And that's what he's going to do with Absalom. And so Hushai, he's one of these fellas, he knows how to say something, and you can write your own interpretation onto it, but you may have it wrong. And you're going to see how wise Hushai is as this story develops. But now here comes Ahithophel. Then said Absalom to Ahithophel, Give counsel among you, what shall we do? Well, Ahithophel, he's got in his mind what Absalom ought to do. Ahithophel said to Absalom, Go in unto thy father's concubines, which he left to keep the house. Remember when we read that last week? And told you then that's probably a mistake to leave those 10 concubines behind to keep the house? It was. So go into thy father's concubines, whom he left to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. Then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. Ahithophel says, Absalom, we got to make a clean break of this. Don't let the people think that maybe we're going to let David come back and somehow you all will work this out. You go into his concubines and it'll erase all doubt. That'll widen the gap between you and David, and then all Israel going to say, boy, Absalom, he means business. And he's running the show now. So they spread Absalom a tent upon the top of the house. And Absalom went into his father's concubines. And notice, I should have highlighted that there, in the sight of all Israel. Everybody could see it. And as the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was if a man had inquired at the oracle of God, so was all the counsel of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. That's the reputation Ahithophel had. He was wise. And you followed his advice. It's like inquiring at the oracle of God. Let's talk about an oracle. You know what an orator is? That's a spokesman. You know what an oration is? That's a speech. So what is an oracle? Well, it's a thing spoken. When Ahithophel speaks, it's like an oracle. And everyone acknowledged the great wisdom and advice of Ahithophel. But that's going to change in the next chapter. Here we're going to bring this to a close, but I want you to remember this verse 22, that Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. And remember back what Nathan said a few chapters ago? 2 Samuel 12 and verse 11. Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house. That's Absalom. And he said, and I will take thy wives before thine eyes and give them unto thy neighbors, and he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of the sun. It'd be no secret thing. And that's what happened. Absalom going into David's concubines under that tent on the roof of his house before all of Israel. Well, now that's chapter 16. And so we've got the Bible Bowl coming up over chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. And so we've got a lot to look at Sunday evening. We'll go on into 17 and see where we go from there. Such amazing stories. And these fellows that keep showing up in David's stories, now we're going to find Ziba again. Later on, we're going to read more about Ahithophel and Hushai. So keep these fellows in mind as we proceed and remember what we've already known about them, and so we can see what is to come. I was talking at the Webb House today. There was about 12 of us there. And act like there may be more then next Sunday. This was the first time we was able to go back and worship with them. The Webb House rule is that the visitors can come, but no more than 3. So Lori and I are 2. And then I don't know if we'll get a third one in there or not. I may be going by myself next time because we're going to have a bunch of kids around next Sunday. But we started that devotional up. But I started this way. They came and they were interested in worshiping and having a Bible study. We sang a song. I kind of went over the lesson I preached this morning with them. And then we had a prayer. And we closed with another song. I said, you know why we're doing this? This glorifies God. We show honor to God when we want to know what His Word says, when we want to worship Him in song, and when we pray to Him. It's a way to glorify God. And I wanted them to know that they were being part of glorifying God today when they came to this worship. And as long as I can go on Sundays, then they're going to be able to continue to be part of that. I want you to think of that. When you come on Sunday evening, Sunday morning, or Wednesday evening, why are you going? Somebody says, well, I don't get anything out of it. Well, you'll get out of it what you put into it, but it's really not for the purpose of getting something out of it, is it? That's not the main reason you go. You're here because your very presence glorifies God. And the world that drives by in the dark and sees the lights on in this building and the cars in the parking lot, they see that. And they know there are people in there trying to worship God. And that's part of the way that we reach the world, by doing this. And so don't ever cut yourself short. Make sure you're there every time you can and worship God all you can. Go to the meetings you can and the special services and such as much as you can, knowing that when you do it, you're bringing glory to God. And you need to be baptized into Jesus Christ. Submitting to God's will brings glory to Him. And if any tonight would like to be buried in water and come up a child of God, they can do it while we sing this invitation song.